deceit, duplicitousness, saying things that aren't true. The hair on my arms is going up just telling you about this. But it happened, and we can prove it. Now, to be clear, news anchors didn't do it. News anchors don't lie. They're good people. Neither do professional cable news commentators, the one making millions on the side as lobbyists for foreign governments or big multinational corporations. Commentators always tell the truth. And that's why they and their scrupulously honest news anchor friends are so utterly disgusted tonight, horrified really, by what retired General Michael Flynn has done. Watch their stunned reactions.
Michael Flynn lied to the FBI. Flynn lied again and again and again to FBI agents. Just lied. Lies, lies, and more lies.
Hold on for just a minute about who's significant and who's not. Flynn lied. The tone should be when you speak to a prosecutor, you speak to the truth. Everybody lied.
Michael Flynn was betraying his country. Michael Flynn was betraying his office.
He lied, says Don Lemon and his news anchor's friend. Lied, lied, lied. He's a very bad man, a lying kind of man, the worst kind. He could never work in television. For his crime of lying, Michael Flynn, the liar, may soon be locked away in a cell. That would keep the rest of us safe from his perfidious lies. That day can't come fast enough, say the news anchors. Cuff him! America longs to breathe free once more. Michael Flynn will be 60 years old next week. The Washington Post calculates he faces 5 years in prison. And let that be a warning to all of us. That's what happens to people who lie in Washington. Or does it? From a golf course somewhere in Dubai, you can almost hear Bill Clinton chuckling softly. Lied under oath, still making 300 grand a speech. Not everyone faces the same penalties for lying, it turns out. Mark Zuckerberg came to Washington last spring to talk about Facebook. That's the soul-destroying social media company that has made him a multi-billionaire. While in town, Zuckerberg stopped by the Congress where, and you might want to ask the kids to leave the room for this, he lied. Yep, don't tell Don Lemon, but Mark Zuckerberg is a liar. Watch him do it.
This is the most important principle for Facebook. Every piece of content that you share on Facebook, you own, and you have complete control over who sees it and how you share it, and you can remove it at any time.
Are you willing to give me more control over my data?
Senator, as someone who uses Facebook, I believe that you should have complete control over your data.
Yeah, you have complete control over your data. You control who sees it, you own it. That's really the most important principle at Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg says so with a completely straight face. The only problem, it was a lie. Sorry, kids. According to a piece in the New York Times, Facebook does not actually allow you or anyone else to control your data. Not at all. In fact, they secretly hand over your data, personal data, to other big tech companies. Now, that decision has made Mark Zuckerberg even richer, adding on to the house in Hawaii probably. Unfortunately, he's had to lie in the process, including to Congress, and that's a crime. As Robespierre once famously noted, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. In this case, the eggs are your privacy. Apparently, Facebook allowed Microsoft's search engine Bing to see the names of your Facebook friends without telling you about it. Facebook also allowed Netflix and Spotify to read your private messages without telling you. Now, there's no evidence so far as of tonight that Facebook has a video camera hidden in your shower, but close enough. That's what Mark Zuckerberg lied about. Not a small lie, really. What did Mike Flynn lie about? Well, according to the FBI, Flynn lied about conversations he'd had with the Russian ambassador, Kislyak. You remember him. Flynn said that he and Kislyak had never talked about expelling Russian diplomats or about Russia voting in the UN on symbolic resolutions. And in fact, they had talked about both of those things. The feds already knew that because they were listening in secretly. There was nothing improper about the conversations that Flynn and Kislyak had. The crime was the lie. It's always the crime, except when it's Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg can lie about something that affects hundreds of millions of Americans, but it's not really a big deal. Zuckerberg is not looking at 5 years in prison. Zuckerberg will not be sanctioned by Congress ever. So what's the difference? Well, unlike Mike Flynn, Mark Zuckerberg is a hero to the American news media. He's who they want to be. He's richer than God. He went to Harvard. He wears T-shirts at work, for real. He's for open borders. All the cool people like Mark Zuckerberg, even in foreign countries. For example, when the fascist government of China was looking for new tools to repress its own population, You think they went to Mike Flynn for help? Yeah, okay, I don't think so. Flynn is tough on China, old-fashioned as he is, but Mark Zuckerberg, by contrast, was happy to help. As they say at McKinsey, Mark Zuckerberg gets it. And by the way, what has Mike Flynn ever done for anyone? 33 years in uniform? That's not very innovative. 2 lies told by 2 high-profile Americans. One is going to prison in late middle age. The other will be available for like 40 years for commencement addresses and awards dinners held in his honor. That's the tale of Mike Flynn and Mark Zuckerberg. It tells you everything. Joining us now to break down what's happening to Mike Flynn is Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz. He's the author of the book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump. Professor, thank you very much for coming on. So I read in the Washington Post this morning, I read Mike Flynn described as a double agent in the Washington Post. And then I saw the judge, Sullivan, yesterday describe him as someone who had committed treason. Is that the crime for which he's facing prison?
No, not at all. And I'll get to that in a second. But, Tucker, I just want to make one point. I hope you don't mind me making it.
I hope you will.
Boycotts and attempts. I hate boycotts and attempts to censor free speech. I'm in favor of complete dialogue. But as such, I feel impelled to tell you that I, with due respect, disagree with the way you categorize mass immigration. That's all. I just want to say that.
Well, that's okay. And by the way,
now
I would expect that you would. We differ probably on a lot of issues, but the one issue that we agree on and that I respect you for is your willingness to say what you think in public, to defend your views, to have a conversation, and to let others decide which side is right. And that's something that I wish we were able to do a lot more of. But you're one of the only liberals who will come on this show.
I completely agree.
Amen. So thank you very much for saying that.
Well, I agree, and I come on the show because I also have the right to say what I think, and when I disagree with you, you allow me to say I disagree with you, and I do. I wish you hadn't used that language. Language like that was used to describe my grandparents and great-grandparents, and probably some of yours. So let's move on.
Well, actually, just in point of fact, since you brought it up, as noted on Monday, that was in the context of a conversation with an elected official in Tijuana about the filth of his city, and he was complaining about how dirty it had become, which was a byproduct of the policy decisions pushed by the American left. And I noted there's a lesson there perhaps for us. So I'm not, and I would never describe people as inherently dirty. I don't think that they are. I'm pro-people. It's one of the reasons I'm against abortion. Strongly. But anyway, whatever. The point is, I wish we were able.
You cleared that up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it was clear, and I think that the people who are mischaracterizing it are always welcome on the show to talk it through and to hear my side, and I will hear their side, because again, this is one of the last forums in America for open conversation. Anyway, but tell me this.
That's very fair. Let's
turn
to
I mean,
Flynn.
that's how I feel.
Look.
I'm not afraid to defend what I think, obviously.
No, look, I agree. Neither am I. On the Flynn issue, look, there's a big issue. I've been teaching this for 50 years. Should it really ever be a crime to lie when you're not under oath? I think you can make a very, very strong case that before you can be convicted of a crime for lying, you should have to raise your hand, put it on a Bible, look to your God or look to your ethics, have a solemn moment where you look the person in the face and swear to him that you're going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That's so different from when 2 guys evade the usual procedures, come in to try to hang out with you and be chummy, say you don't need a lawyer, we just want to ask you a couple of questions, and then trap him by asking him questions that they already knew the answer to and had videotapes and audio tapes that could make it clear that they were only asking him the question in order to give him an opportunity to lie. So I really do think that we have kind of 3 criteria. Just lying politically. It's done too often. I hate it, but it's done too often. It's not a crime. Second, lying only to government officials, which is a crime, but probably shouldn't be a crime. Or if it is, it should be a misdemeanor, not a serious felony akin to raising your right arm and swearing under oath that you will tell the truth. There's too much lying in Washington, and there are too many, as you point out correctly, double standards about who is prosecuted for lying. You know, in civil cases, people lie in depositions all the time, and they're never prosecuted. I tried to bring a case recently against people who lied. Prosecutors laugh at you. Lying in a deposition, that's like gambling in Casablanca. It's just done all the time, and it's tragic that it's done. I testified in front of Congress about this when they were going after Bill Clinton and and impeaching him for his lies. I had a whole session where I talked about how many lies are told in how many different places and how selective they are in going after people. That's one of the problems of not requiring an oath. It gives you the opportunity to selectively pick people to prosecute for lying not under oath.
We're almost out of time, but it is a lie rather, it is a crime to lie to federal investigators, but it's not a crime for them to lie to you. Why?
No, not only that, the Supreme Court has said it's perfectly okay for police and FBI agents to lie to you, and that happens every day. You'll have two people who they suspect of a crime. They'll bring one person in and say, oh, by the way, your buddy just ratted you out, just turned you in, and you're going to get executed unless you tell us that he did it too. And of course, it was a total lie. They say the same thing to the other person, and the Supreme Court has said lying by FBI agents, lying by federal officials is permissible and de rigueur. It's done all the time. Right. But if you lie back to them, then it's a crime. It's even a crime, the Supreme Court has said, to deny that you did something. If somebody asks you, did you do something, a crime, and you say, no, and you did, you've doubled your punishment by now lying about whether you committed a crime. The irony about Flynn is he wasn't lying about committing a crime. He did nothing wrong. What he did was perfectly legal. I'm still scratching my head and trying to figure out why he lied. What was his motive? Is it possible he misremembered?
And by the way,
now
why were the Feds spying on the incoming national security advisor? Is that normal? I don't know. Professor, thank you very much.
Comey told us. Comey said, look, I could get away with it, Comey said.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think you should be spying on members of your own executive branch unless there's a good reason to do that. But anyway, thank you very much. Good to see you.
Right. Thank you.
Well, yesterday, the president accused the Mueller investigation of intentionally and illegally deleting 19,000 text messages. Those were between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. The DOJ claims the text messages were not erased intentionally, but they were lost due to technical errors. Speaking of lying, is that a lie or is it true? Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch, joins us tonight. Really simple. I mean, it's hard to believe that the Department of Justice would lie about something like that. Are they or are they not?
Well, we don't know the truth. We've got these two categories of text messages. These are text messages the DOJ had or the FBI had back when Page and Strzok were not members of the Mueller special counsel team, and there was a gap in terms of capturing those text messages, and there were about 19,000 that were subsequently recovered supposedly by the IG. And then they go work for Mueller's operation. They get removed because of these text messages that they were sending around talking about insurance policies against Trump and being pro-Hillary. And IG asked for their phone because he wants to look at more of these text messages. And their phones have been wiped, have been reset, unrecoverable. We don't know how many text messages were erased by the Mueller special counsel operation. They remove him for Page and they remove Strzok specifically for misconduct and bias that was found in his text messages, but no one looks at his text messages from the time he was in the Mueller special counsel operation, the most sensitive investigation the Justice Department's been involved in decades. Unbelievable.
Investigations are, by definition, supposed to be preserving evidence. So, I mean, do you think it's plausible that the Mueller people might have been implicated in erasing evidence? I mean, that just seems like a shocking.
Well, you know what? Manafort was accused of withholding evidence. You know what they did? They didn't know for sure whether he was. They issued a search warrant and they raided his home with guns drawn in the early morning. That's not what happens when the government erases evidence on purpose or accidentally. You know, and it's so bad, this special counsel. You see in the Flynn investigation questions about how that investigation was handled. Now we have these missing text messages and the Strzok.
Well, it really makes you wish we had elected officials in this country who could protect the rest of us from these abuses. I wonder where they are.
We need a special counsel for the special counsel.
Yeah, or how about just someone elected? Do something. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mark Zuckerberg hid the truth from Congress. He lied. So lawmakers planning to do anything about his lies. We'll ask an incoming senator about that next. So Mark Zuckerberg just got caught lying in front of Congress about selling the deeply private data of more than 200 million Americans. Probably your data, by the way. It's one of the more flagrant abuses big tech has committed recently. There's a long list of those. But it's hardly the only abuse. All the major tech platforms have colluded to silence opinions they don't like and to destroy the people who express those opinions. They've done this in the open. We've watched it happen. Google employees secretly, meanwhile, discussed hiding conservative websites in search results because they're just not legitimate. Facebook's founding president, Sean Parker, admitted that his company created an intentionally addictive product like cigarettes that could destroy children's brains, which is exactly, of course, what it's done. It all adds up to a terrifying picture, a serious menace to this country, to our democracy, to our mental health, check the numbers on that sometime, to our cohesion as a nation. It's a real threat, obviously, and everybody knows it. How's Congress doing protecting us from any of these threats? Good question. They're not, and they're not even trying. And if you're wondering why they're not trying, the answer might be, in part anyway, the outgoing Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. Ryan didn't seem interested in reining in the tech companies in any way when he was the third most powerful man in America. In part, he was too busy preventing a wall from being built on the southern border to get to the tech question. But there might have been other reasons. We're just speculating now. Now that he's leaving the Congress and moving to the private sector, will Paul Ryan be taking any money from any of the big tech firms like Facebook or Google or Twitter? Seemed like an interesting question, obvious one that no one else has asked. So we called Paul Ryan's office today and we asked that question. We haven't got an answer yet. It's 8:20 p.m. Eastern. We're going to keep checking. We're going to get back to you when they respond. So the leadership of the House, of course, is changing. Democrats are taking over, but the Republicans still hold the Senate. Is there any interest, will there be, in reining in tech at all? Josh Hawley was just elected senator. He's a Republican from Missouri, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Senator-elect, thanks very much for coming on. Now, I'm not going to force you to join me in pointing fingers as to why this hasn't been done up to this point, but I will ask the question, do you think the Congress, maybe on a bipartisan basis going forward, will recognize that maybe there's some tweaking that needs to be done in the government's relationship with these companies?
Tucker, thanks for having me on, and I certainly hope so. I mean, it's time that Congress got serious about protecting the privacy, the data, the personal confidential information of hundreds of millions of Americans. And to see this report today that Facebook has allowed these big tech companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Spotify, Netflix, to have access to the personal information of users after Facebook said that it would not give away users' personal data, is really extraordinary. And look, it's time Congress did something about it. It's time the FTC did something about it.
So you often hear people say, well, Congress can't actually act to regulate these companies because its members are too old and they don't understand technology. I'll freely admit I don't understand technology at all. I try not to participate in it at any level, and yet the abuses are still obvious to me. That doesn't really seem like a very good excuse.
Well, listen, I mean, what needs to happen here is, number one, Facebook promised the FTC in 2011 in a binding consent decree. They said that they would not share personal, private, confidential data of users without the user's consent. Well, Tucker, it looks like that's exactly what Facebook is doing, though, that they are sharing that data in order to make a profit, as you pointed out, without users' consent. So, number one, FTC needs to enforce the consent decree. They need to investigate right now whether or not Facebook has violated it. Number two, Congress needs to investigate, and Congress needs to take steps to protect the privacy of Americans. They need to make sure that Americans own their own data and can protect it.
So this is a little bit out of left field, but I think that maybe there's a connection. The CDC just came out with new suicide numbers, and suicide is one of the leading causes of death in this country. Its incidence has dramatically increased, and all of us in middle age know people, tragically, who've killed themselves recently. There's a lot of speculation and some evidence that there's a connection between increased use of tech products and this tragic epidemic of suicide. Is anyone, do you think, at the federal level going to look a little more closely into this? It seems like something worth investigating.
You know, I think it is worth studying, and I think that, look, it's time that we asked about the role of big tech in our lives. I mean, you've talked a lot about the sweetheart deals big tech gets from government. I think it's time we took a hard look at those. I think it's time we looked at the effect big tech is having on our personal lives, on our families, on our schools, on our society. These are major companies, many of them monopolies. They make billions of dollars a year. There have never been more powerful companies in the history of the world, and they need to be held accountable.
Man, I wish I lived in Missouri so I could vote for you again. It's so nice to hear an elected official say that. I'm sorry to suck up. I couldn't control myself. Mr. Hawley, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we're just hours away right now from a potential government shutdown. The debate is over funding for the border wall. Will there be a border wall, or has that dream died? Details ahead.
Two minds. As you know, Martha, I'm not a big fan of giving the hackers what they want, and what they want is this, that they tap into our communication systems and then open the kimono so everybody can see where the disagreements were, and then we talk about it. Now, that said, if you look at these cables, I think it is true they're clearly nervous about Donald Trump. Some of that nervousness is called for. I guess I would say President Trump wants it to be that he keeps them off balance. Though I will say some of these, if you look at the cables, they're reacting to the same things that lead even some of his supporters in the U.S. to kind of cringe. You know, when he fires off stuff off script or goes on Twitter and says things that he probably shouldn't, you can see the allies reacting, and you can see the U.S. officials saying, no, he didn't really mean that. He's not going to do that. And so I think there are two different types of cables in there.
Yeah, I think just given what he says himself, he probably doesn't mind if they think he's unpredictable, and he sees that as playing into, you know, America first.
Martha, that's exactly right. Look, he got elected as president of the United States, not president of the world as Barack Obama tried to be. And so he said he was going to pull out of the Paris trade deal, the bad Paris trade deal. He did. They don't like that. He pulled out of this bad Iran deal. He said he promised he would do it. They didn't like that. That's what makes him a little bit, you know, as a president that they can't read and they don't feel comfortable with. And that's a good thing for America.
All right, guys, we got to leave it there.
Well, there's some good and some bad.
Okay, that was a quick thought.
Just saying they're going to interrogate Americans was kind of nuts, and we didn't actually do that.
Not the best moment of the Helsinki news conference, that's for sure. But thank you, guys. Thank you for weighing in tonight. Good to see you both.
Thank you.
So coming up next, more on that stunning decision from a federal judge who says that deported asylum seekers have a right now to come back to the United States to have their cases heard here. Judge Andrew Napolitano on the judge who made this decision, who's gotten a lot of attention this week, and also the decision itself. What a week. Tonight, another stunning turn of events from the judge who presided over Michael Flynn's sentencing hearing. Judge Emmett Sullivan today ruled against the Trump administration's policies on immigration asylum claims, saying those who sued after they were deported should be brought back into the country to have those claims heard. Joining me now is Judge Andrew Napolitano, Fox News senior judicial analyst. Judge, great to have you back with us tonight. I want to get into both of these cases with you tonight, but let's start with this asylum one, because according to the Department of Justice, under the laws passed by Congress, asylum is only for those who have legitimate fear of persecution on the basis of their race, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group.
Right. The Justice Department under Attorney General Sessions promulgated rules which the Congress could have disturbed and did not, which said if you're coming here claiming domestic violence or gang violence, we're not going to let you in because you don't fit in the category which is the statutory basis for asylum. Judge Sullivan, when I read this, I said to myself, this can't be the same Judge Sullivan, but it is. As we'll talk about in a minute. Judge Emmett Sullivan, the same judge who presided over the Flynn sentencing yesterday, issued a ruling today. It's 107 pages long. He didn't write it today. This was ready to come out. Basically saying that fleeing domestic violence or fleeing gang violence is the moral equivalent of fleeing official government repression. In one case, the government aggressively represses you because you belong to a group the government hates. In another case, the government is failing to protect you. So therefore, you are entitled to make the asylum claim. The Jeff Sessions rule, which again is a Justice Department rule that Congress could have disturbed but didn't, is invalid.
Okay, but in these cases, those people are coming from Honduras, El Salvador. They're passing through several countries on their way to this country, and Mexico offered them asylum.
Yes, and they rejected that because they ultimately want to come.
Can you pick and choose the country that you want to be in, that you want to have asylum in, or is it I have to flee, I'm in danger for my life, and as soon as I get somewhere safe, I'm going to stay?
That is a great question, because if you are truly just fleeing violence in your home country. You will go to the same place, in the first place in which you can be safe. But if you're truly trying to get to the land of gold and opportunity for a reason that does not permit you to come here, because the economic conditions are better here than in Honduras, which is profoundly not a lawful basis for asylum, then you're going to reject Mexico's offer and try and come here.
And most people said they were coming for a better life, which everyone can understand, but we need a process to allow people in and out.
Now, I've never heard of people being ordered back. Surely the federal government doesn't have to find them and bring them back, but when they knock on the door again, their application will be accepted. They'll be detained in one of those tent cities that the government has built at the border, and then there'll be a trial, not before Judge Sullivan in Washington, but before an immigration judge at the border, and that immigration judge will determine if this is a real or a fanciful asylum claim.
All right, I want to get your quick thought on what happened with Michael Flynn yesterday and this judge who made some mistakes in the things that he said and had to claw them back.
Right. You know, in my career as a judge in New Jersey, I sentenced over 1,000 people. The state court, but for almost any crime you can imagine. You have to be temperate and measured and sober in your demeanor when you're sentencing someone. You can't go off on them. You can't express personal rage about them. And you certainly can't misstate the facts. Nor can you say something like this to the government. Did the general ever commit treason? I mean, that is the most incendiary thing you could possibly say in that environment, for which there is absolutely zero evidence. Of course, both sides said, no, no, no. We know the definition of treason, providing aid and comfort to the enemy in wartime or waging war against the United States. Your Honor, there's no basis for that whatsoever. It's almost as if he was so taken aback by the prevailing public opinion that this judge thinks this is just a little white lie and the FBI knew about it anyway and he's going to throw it out. He went 180 degrees in the opposite direction. The question now is, can this judge who expressed such personal animosity, not based on fact, against General Flynn, fairly sentence him in March? That's what's going to be litigated now.
Well, you know, I mean, the suggestion, the question about treason, he based on an understanding that he professed that Michael Flynn was working for the Turkish government while he was national security advisor in the White House, which the prosecution said, oh, that's not true, Judge. That wasn't the case. He finished that contract long before he went to the White House.
He took the treason statement back after a break.
Yeah, but you wouldn't know that if you watched, like, you know, 99% of what was going on TV this morning.
That is true. The treason thing, as I said, is the most incendiary.
Once it's out there.
Correct. He did take it back after a half-an-hour conference. We don't know what went on in the conference. Presumably the general's lawyers were there and the government's lawyers were there. Now, the general's lawyers made some mistakes. The government said, we want the general to get 0 time in jail. When the government says that, you say, thank you very much, I have nothing else to say. You don't attack the government for the manner in which they prosecuted you. That's what opened up this can of worms.
They should have been quiet as little mice.
Correct.
Waiting for the day that they go to court and hope that what they were hoping for was going to happen.
In fairness to Judge Sullivan, I will say this. Sometimes the government and defense lawyer come to you with a deal that you don't think is fair. So it not only has to be a deal that both litigants agree on, the court has to accept it. But the way to interrogate them on the deal is not to make incendiary allegations, but to ask questions. Why did you forgive him all these things? Did he help you with that much? Why did you prosecute his 2 buddies for failing to register as foreign agents, but not him? I need to know.
All legitimate questions.
Correct. I, as the judge, need to know how much help he gave you. Did it really outweigh the gravity of these crimes for which there's enough evidence to prosecute and convict him?
Judge, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great to see you tonight.
Of course.
So coming up next, the honorable act from Dan Crenshaw, war veteran and soon-to-be congressman, who stepped in for an SNL star in need. Governor Mike Huckabee joins me next.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate you saying that.
So we good?
We're good.
When you met Pete Davidson, how did you guys get along? How did it go at first?
Oh, pretty well. You know, my take on it was that they genuinely didn't really mean it the way it came out. I think they were sincerely apologetic and wanted to make it right.
That was Congressman-elect Dan Crenshaw on the story last month, talking about the unlikely bond formed with SNL star Pete Davidson, who once mocked the wounded veteran during a skit. But now Crenshaw is being commended for an honorable act of kindness. He reached out to Davidson after this troubling social media post that Pete Davidson wrote. I really don't want to be on this earth anymore. I'm doing my best to stay here for you, but I actually don't know how much longer I can last. Chilling. Crenshaw picked up the phone to deliver a personal message saying, I told him everybody had a purpose in this world. God put you here for a reason, and it's your job to find that purpose. You should live that way. Here now, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, a Fox News contributor. Obviously it just breaks your heart to see what Pete Davidson wrote in that, and we wish him well. I think, we all were endeared to him watching his back and forth with Congressman Crenshaw, and he obviously has, some challenges, and we wish him well.
Well, and Pete's clearly got some real troubles, and my heart goes out to him. When I saw that social media post, my heart sank for him. This is a young man with some deep, deep hurt. But what an amazing thing Dan Crenshaw did by reaching out to him and having built a relationship with him that didn't start out too healthy. It just shows what a classy guy Dan Crenshaw is. And I was just thinking, my gosh, I wish we could clone Dan Crenshaw and put him in the other 434 seats in the House of Representatives.
As I said, I hope Pete Davidson is doing well, and we all wish him well, and we're glad he reached out. That's the most important thing you can do when someone's in trouble, is to reach out and to talk and to take time, and that's exactly what Dan Crenshaw did. Switching gears here to talk about the Super Bowl, which apparently is having trouble finding somebody to play with Maroon 5 as a special guest during the halftime. Amy Schumer has boycotted. She did this ad we can play last time around. And she says, I've done 2 Super Bowl commercials in the last couple of years, and I'm so stupid in thinking my opinion would matter, right? Well, guess what? I may have made a difference, she says. So she feels like she's helping the whole boycott thing. Your thoughts?
Well, the NFL has completely ruined its brand. Its TV ratings are down by double digits. There are people that don't renew their skyboxes anymore because they just don't want to be a part of it. All because the league didn't have the courage to just tell a player, look, we're not going to take a knee during the national anthem. This was an insult to a major part of their fan base. A few years ago, I was at a tomato festival in Arkansas, the Pink Tomato Festival in Warren, Arkansas, and I'll never forget they had asked the Miss Pink Tomato, which was a big deal, with the crown, the sash, the whole thing. Oh, it was, yeah. And they asked her, was she excited about having a part of the tomato eating contest? And she looked with all the TV cameras running and said, I really don't like tomatoes that much. And I thought, this is like the NFL saying to half their fans, we really don't like you guys very much. And that's the result. This whole controversy has resulted in a just decimation of their ratings and popularity. I don't think it's ever going to come back to where it was. I really doubt.
It's an interesting boycott on the part of these folks. It feels like there's not that many people kneeling anymore, and it continues to string the whole thing out. I have a suggestion, because I saw a pretty good band open at the PBR. I don't know if you remember that, in Nashville. There he is, Mike Huckabee and Ryan Weaver. So are you guys available? You want to join Maroon 5 at the Super Bowl?
I'll tell you what, anything Ryan Weaver, who is a great American hero, served this country in the military so honorably, if he ever asked me to do something, even if it were the Super Bowl, I'd show up and do it. I really admire him, and I love the PBR. That was a great event.
Hopefully your message will get across. It was a fun night. It was my first time. I really liked it.
Yes.
Governor Huckabee, always good to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha. Merry Christmas.
You too. Merry Christmas. Coming up, this is an incredible story of one sailor's life-saving actions. I think this is a story you have never heard about Pearl Harbor and this young man when we come back.
The true story of Navy sailor Joe George, who disobeyed a direct order on December 7, 1941, and chose instead to rescue the final 6 crewmen off the burning USS Arizona.
Tonight, the story of an American hero nearly lost from the history books. Navy sailor Joe George defied direct orders during the attack on Pearl Harbor in a bold and courageous move that saved the lives of 6 U.S. sailors. His action earning a Bronze Star years after his death. His story lives on in a documentary narrated by Gary Sinise.
Joe George was topside on a vessel doing some work when all hell broke loose along Battleship Row. around 6 minutes past 8 a.m., after already taking several hits from Japanese bombs, the USS Arizona suffered its fatal wound. Commander Young ordered all lines connecting the USS Vestal to the USS Arizona be cut so the Vestal could pull away from the burning battleship. As the smoke cleared for just a few seconds between Vestal and Arizona, Joe George saw the 6 trapped men. Despite being given a direct order and the ongoing Japanese attack in Pearl Harbor, Joe George was not going to leave those men on the Arizona to die.
Joining me now, Tim Gray, filmmaker of Lifeline, Pearl Harbor's unknown hero, and founder of the World War II Foundation. Tim, good to have you with us.
It's spectacular to be
Gary
here.
Sinise is so wonderful. His voice is so fantastic. So what happened after that? How did he save these men?
Joe George is an interesting guy because the USS Vestal was tied up to the Arizona. It was a repair ship. So the executive officer told Joe George, stop cutting the lines from the Vestal to the Arizona. We got to get our ship out of here. And George looked up and he saw 6 men, the last 6 men who were on the USS Arizona alive. And he made a decision at that point, do I cut this next line and get my ship free, or do I save these men? And Joe George was a rambunctious guy. He was a boxer. He was a brawler. He liked to drink. He was Old Navy. And he made a decision in that moment to save those final 6 men on the USS Arizona. And it was one of those decisions that any soldier has to make in combat. It's not necessarily the rule book decision. It's the decision that's the right decision, and he made it.
And they owe him his life, and so do all of their children. And here's another piece of sound from the movie. Watch.
We're here on account of him. And my sons and my family and my granddaughters.
God knew on that morning of December 7th, 1941, just what was going to happen. And he knew he would have this larger-than-life man, Joe George, my father, in the place he was for a reason, to save these magnificent men.
We didn't get it done soon enough just so Joe could appreciate it.
Incredible. It gives me chills watching that. And, you know, you think of all of the over 1,000 men went down with the ship. Most of them were asleep. It was early morning on the Arizona.
Yep.
And these individuals were saved because of him. And he was home the night before because he was in trouble.
He got in trouble. He got into a fight. He was a boxer. He was a heavyweight boxer for the Navy, and he was one of the best boxers in the Navy. And after he had his official bout, he went out in downtown Honolulu on North Hotel Street, which where all the bars are and everything, and he got into an unofficial fight and the MPs came and put him back on the ship on December 5th. So he just happened to be there, confined to the ship on the morning of December 7th, and when all hell broke loose. And he was the right man in the right place at the right time in history. And he was a big guy. He was muscular. He was the only guy probably who could have gotten that line over the 70 feet over from the Vestal to the Arizona, so these survivors that you just saw in that clip, Don Stratton being one of them, could hand over hand get over. And there are generations, and there are grandkids and kids and great grandkids who are alive because of this man Joe George, who was not known and was one of the first heroes of World War II for America.
And he never spoke about it. His children didn't know that he was this truly great hero who saved lives.
Yeah, he didn't speak about it till much later in his life. And when the Arizona survivors, 2 of the 6 who were still alive, Don Stratton and Lauren Bruner, they decided that this guy needed to be recognized. Carlson Young was the captain of the Vestal. He won the Medal of Honor at Pearl Harbor, but he was killed in a battle at Guadalcanal. So he wrote a little entry in his logbook commending Joe George. But that was it. It went away after Carlson Young died. And these veterans said, listen, this guy deserves a medal. He wasn't the perfect model sailor, but what he did, he saved 6 lives. So Don Stratton and his son Randy and Lauren Bruner and the others spent 15, 20 years trying to get a medal, and they met with President Trump in the Oval Office. They met with Secretary Mattis. They went to the Pentagon. They met with Cory Gardner and Jeff Flake. And right at the last minute, in November of last year, a Bronze Star with a V for Valor came through and was presented to his daughter, Joanne Taylor, on the USS Arizona Memorial. The only time a medal has been presented on the USS Arizona Memorial. And he's just one of the unsung heroes
Pearl Harbor. There were others we know about, Dory Miller and many others, but these are the stories that we like to tell to motivate people to learn more about World War II.
I'm so glad you're telling them. And people can see it on PBS. It's been running since November 1st.
Correct.
And it is just one of the many stories that you tell, and keep these stories alive, and we thank you for that.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
So that is our story for this Wednesday night. Tomorrow, my exclusive untold story behind Senator Susan Collins' Kavanaugh vote. She explained things to me that she has never talked about in this whole process and how she got to yes. That is tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. We will see you there tomorrow night, everybody. Tucker Carlson's up next.
Good evening and shocking news. Lying has been detected here in Washington. Mendacity